Would you like to learn how to make a delicious cruller at home?
Well, today on WTF, we're going to show you a few tips and tricks on how to make the crispiest cruller. Hello and welcome to WTF, where we transform food here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen. I'm Chef Scott Guerin.
And I'm Janie Wang, one of the owners of Modernist Pantry. And here on WTF, every week we cover unique ingredients and techniques and show you recipes for your kitchen. So remember to subscribe so that you get notified of our episodes as they come out. This week, we are going to be showing you how to make a cruller in your kitchen, which is really fun because this is kind of a bit of a hard one, but we're going to make it easy for you. And Scott, for people who may not have had too many crullers in their life, can you talk a little bit about how is it different from a regular donut?
So crullers are a donut, but they're made completely differently because they're mostly egg and they're extremely light. They're crispy on the outside, almost melt in your mouth on the inside. And they're just, for me, one of the best donut experiences you can have because you can have a ton of them. And as you can see, I like to have a ton of donuts. But they're just really, really good. They go great with coffee. They're just a wonderful thing. And we found a few different ways to improve upon them and make them the best that we've ever had. So.
Yeah, and I think on that note, what exactly are some of the challenges that people face when they try to make this type of fried pastry at home?
So crullers are relatively easy. They're a process that is done for a lot of different things, but if you've never made either eclairs or pâte à choux or crullers, it can be very different than any other baked good that you've ever had.
Right.
So we can get into the process here and just show a few little improvements that we thought of so you get that more consistent crust on the outside, that frying on the outside, that super crispiness, making sure it's not penetrated with a ton of oil. All those types of things are really important for having a great cruller, so you're not just making them at home and saying, oh, these are okay, because these are great.
All right, let's jump right into the demo. What do we do?
So as you can see, we don't have like a stand mixer here yet, which is very different. We're going to add water to this bowl. So we do about 50-50 water and milk. Some recipes call for just water, some recipes call for just milk. What that is going to change is kind of the consistency on the outside. So we found that half and half is good, but also another ingredient that we're going to add that will make it super consistent is coming up in a little bit.
Okay.
So the first thing is get these three heated up. So we have our butter, water, milk, and I need to melt the butter here inside of all that.
Okay.
So that's the first part. And at this point, I'll add my vanilla bean. So this is just a scraped quarter of a vanilla bean. So the vanilla beans we have are amazing, grade A, super plump, filled with those seeds.
Yep.
So even a quarter of it will be perfect for this half of the recipe here.
And when you say melt, are you bringing this mixture to a boil or just wait until the butter melts and that's it?
I bring it to a simmer.
Okay.
So you bring it to a simmer and then we got to add our dry ingredients. So our dry ingredients consist of flour, all-purpose flour in this case, non-diastatic malt powder. And non-diastatic malt powder replaces all of the sugar in just about anyone's recipe for this. And it does a few things. Sugar will add browning to the outside, but it also can tend to burn a little bit faster. So non-diastatic malt powder gives you a super consistent browning on the outside. It won't burn as fast, and it has more flavor. So you get that malty richness that comes from it, which is nice because you drizzle them in sugar. So, so a little bit more richness on the, the inside can really contrast that sweetness on the outside. Then that next thing we added was carboxymethylcellulose. Now carboxymethylcellulose is an ingredient that will help prevent the oil from seeping in. So everything on the inside will stay extremely delicate, extremely light, and not greasy or oily. It's just all on the outside that is that crispy bit, and then you get that nice, almost creamy, like melt in your mouth inside. So.
Well, that sounds really good. And if you're like, I haven't come across these two particular ingredients before, we are going to link to them at the end of this episode so you can learn all about non-diastatic malt powder as well as CMC. But I know that some of our viewers have been working with something called diastatic malt powder for a while now, and I think the question is always, can I sub that in? Can I just put diastatic and not have to buy the non? Can you talk a little bit about the differences between the two?
So if I were to add, especially this recipe, if I were to add non-diastatic, I'm sorry, if I was to add diastatic, this heating process would stop it.
Okay.
So it wouldn't work at all. Because this is already converted to the sugars, then we're good. But if I were to add regular diastatic malt powder, this heating would just stop it, so it would not be able to consume any of the the starches and convert them to sugars. So I would have to actually make something else and then add it to this recipe. It just would not work for this recipe at all. So you cannot interchange it because the heating, like I said, will stop that starch conversion.
Okay.
So this is up to a simmer now. This is perfect. I don't need a rolling, rip and boil. I can get there after this. So I just add these directly right in. They will mix in nice and easily.
Okay, and that's something that I wanted to ask about as well, because usually we recommend, hey, if you're working with hydrocolloids, you should be dry mixing them with something because they tend to clump. But I saw that you didn't do that with the CMC.
There's not really a need for this. It's going to get mixed in, and then it's going to get beaten in really well in the next section.
Okay.
So it's going to work just fine.
Okay, so there is that step where it's going to get that high level of agitation.
Yep, absolutely. So for camera purposes, put this in a smaller container, so I'm trying not to make a mess of it. But this is basically where we're going to be. In a larger pot, you're going to take this, you're going to mix it in really well. It'll become this very stiff mass.
Okay.
And then you need to cook it until it starts to free itself from the bottom of the pan and it is very uniform. So that's where we're at right now. So once I stir this up just a little bit more, beautiful. Try not to make a...
Yeah, use a larger pan if you're doing this at home.
Yeah, it's tough with those tall sides to see anything that's going on in the pan, so we do it for you. Great. So this will become a little bit more uniform as we cook it, and then it'll be ready to go.
All right. And you said when it comes naturally from the bottom, is that kind of a sign that people are looking for to know that it's ready to go?
Yeah, so the butter that's in there, the fat will help free it up from the bottom. And also when it's that uniform mass, it will just move itself around the pan really easily. But when it's sticky like this, it is not cooked enough. The starch is not cooked enough. And you want to make sure you get it to that point so when we get to that mixing, it's able to take on those eggs that we're going to add in.
Okay.
So this is pretty close, so I'm going to stir this for just a little bit more, then we'll come back and we'll do the next part, which is going to take place in the stand mixer.
Okay, perfect.
Sound good?
We'll be right back.
All right, so now that we have our first part of our batter made, we're just add it directly into the stand mixer while it's hot. We're going to turn it on and beat it for a little bit to get a little bit of the heat and the steam out, but you want just enough heat in there so that when the eggs go in, it will incorporate them really easily. But if it goes in super hot, those eggs will cook immediately. That's
what I was wondering about. Why? Is there a reason why we don't wait for it to come to room temp before we do this?
Because it won't work properly. You won't get that right emulsification. So there's a lot of things that you have to worry about with this and pay attention to. Is add one egg at a time. If I add all these eggs in, most likely it will split, it will break, and it won't come back together.
Okay.
But the heat will help bring it back together really easily and slightly cook those eggs, almost temper them in. So I add one, and it looks like it completely separates. If you can see this, it looks like it completely separates, and it's a disaster, right? But it's not. We have to just allow it to beat until that egg incorporates, and then we add another one. And each one will be a little bit easier to add in. So it's good.
I don't know if you can see this from any of our camera angles, but I'm just wondering, how do you know when the egg is fully incorporated in here?
That's actually a great question. We may be able to get a little shot of it. Is as it mixes in, see how it's starting to come together more and more and more?
Yes.
You'll see it start to stick to the sides more and be smoother.
Okay.
That's one. You're mixing in all those ingredients that we added before. They're mixing nice and evenly. But see how it's starting to smooth out now?
Yes.
This is almost at the point where we can add another one.
Got it.
So it's at this point it's mixed in, it's emulsified into everything. Now I can add another one and it looks like it separates again. We repeat that process and by the end it is extremely smooth. It has like a nice yellow tint to it from the eggs and it's perfect. I would not suggest switching out powdered eggs for this. It just would not work the same way because you want that, a lot of the moisture from this matters to this recipe. So stick with a traditional, just cracked egg in there.
Okay, well, as Scott is emulsifying the rest of the eggs, I want to take a moment to talk about this week's giveaway, which is going to be both a bag of the non-diastatic, it is hard to say, of the non-diastatic malt powder and a bag of the vanilla beans so that you can make this recipe at home. In order to enter to win, just leave in the comments below another type of like maybe pastry recipe that you would like to see us tackle here in the kitchen. So whether it's something that you've always had a little bit of trouble with and you're wondering how to perfect it, or maybe it's a family favorite that you just want to have a modern take on. So either way, leave your favorite pastry recipe that you would like to see us do in the comments below in order to enter to win.
Perfect.
All right.
So I'm adding in my last egg here. Every one a little bit easier to get in there. If you feel the side here, Jane, you can see it brings it down in temp quite a bit, right? It's about maybe 120 degrees at this point. It's perfect. This is exactly where we need it. This last part, it'll finish up, and we add no leavening to this because the eggs do all of that. So anything you see here is all from the eggs naturally, catching their steam and bloating up and having that really beautiful texture. So a little bit here, and you can see how smooth this is.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful.
Right? There's a little bit stuck here, which I can just pop back in and then just whip until it comes together. But we have this gorgeous shoe paste,
smooth. Yep, very
which is
shiny.
One of the most unappealing names that the French have given us, shoe paste. So this this here will turn into eclairs. They will turn into cream puffs or profiteroles. All of that is made from this, as well as crullers. So this recipe, if you wanted to not use it for crullers, you can use it for any one of those things.
Awesome.
So it's multi-use. It's a great thing to have. So all we have to do is take this, put it into a piping bag, and then we can get into the frying process.
Okay, well, we're going to take another break to reset the table, and we'll be right back.
All right, so we have our batter. We have our pot of oil heated up. One thing about the oil is don't try to go with 350, which is like a normal frying temp. If you go with 350, you're going to end up with really blonde on the outside crullers, but also they will be very soggy very quick on the outside.
Interesting.
So the hotter will set it very fast, and you'll have a nice crispier exterior for longer, right?
Okay, so when you say hotter, what are you talking about?
So the hottest any like neutral flavored oil can go to is 392. I would suggest around 385.
Okay.
Make sure you have a good thermometer because sometimes it can be 10 degrees off and you don't want to have like, a big house full of smoky oil or the danger of burning or anything like that.
Yep.
Make sure that you are, taking the proper precautions and everything with your oil. Never leave it. So that's a good thing. But make sure that it's hot, hot, hot. Then if you want to, you can pipe this directly in. So if actually one thing we can do is just show like if I just wanted to do a regular cruller, which is like a straight one, I can do that easy. But I can also put it onto the paper if I want to have a circular cruller. The thing about this is make sure that you cool this batter. If you do it when it's still warm, it'll go on here and then it'll flatten out. You don't want that.
Okay.
But when I put it onto this paper, I dunk the paper directly in.
Okay. How do we get the paper off?
This is a great thing. So I start basting the back side of this, and you'll immediately see how it got really white there. So you're actually cooking the top of the cruller, and that'll be the bottom of the cruller because it's not the the pretty side of it.
Right.
But I continue to do this.
I'm waiting for Scott to reach into this burning oil with his hand and just rip that paper off.
In a second.
I'm like, how is he getting the paper
Yeah, you
out?
can use tweezers, which I believe I have. If not, I will find a way.
Okay.
Life finds a way, Janie. So allow these to go for about 2 minutes per side.
Okay.
You can see this one. You can flip them periodically. If you flip them too early, you'll have a tendency to have this top burst open because it's looking for a way to expand, but the bottom's starting to create a crust. So it must expand out the top. So if you are going to flip them more often, continuously flip them.
Okay.
But that's why this one is ballooning up really well, because it is cooking mostly from the bottom. So.
And I do love, you can kind of already see how uniformly brown it is across the board.
So
and that's one of the benefits of the non-diastatic,
have
right?
chef hands, you can
get
that hot
I would
oil.
not have done that.
Yes, use tweezers, use tongs, anything like that. And just give a little bit over the top there. Right, and see how it splits like that? That's totally fine. So just flip it back over.
Yep. It'll still be delicious.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little about while this is finishing frying? You know, we kind of like breezed over it, but we said, you know, the CMC will help it absorb less oil so you don't get a greasy cruller. Can you go into that, like maybe a little bit of detail as we're waiting for this to finish up?
Sure, the CMC is a slight thickener, and so it mixes with the water that's in the recipe, the water and the milk. So as it expands out, it's going to just create a barrier so that the oil can't really get in because it's so, you know, connected to the milk, and it almost emulsifies itself in really well. Crullers don't have too much of an issue with oil getting in. What they do have an issue with is that those cracks, right? And then you get like a pocket of oil. So the CMC is going to help prevent, you know, that oil from then getting into those cracks and then continuously seeping through the entire thing, so you don't bite into it and find pockets of oil and stuff like that.
And actually, we forgot to put the CMC on the table, but we're going to toss it in there with the giveaway, so you will also get a bag of the CMC. And it's kind of cool because we use CMC in a lot of different frying recipes, obviously not just, you know, crullers or donuts, but, you know, breadings, batters.
Yep.
It's good for a lot of things.
Yeah, you could absolutely use it in whatever you want that's fried, just to prevent any of that oil. So as you see that this is not bubbling as much as this one, so this one has more water in it.
Yep.
So this is getting closer and closer, and it has that super consistent browning on the outside, which is perfect. That's exactly what you want. Let me flip it over. We can get really good shots of those sides. So take these out. They're almost like little churros. They don't have to be uniform. If you want them to be uniform, you can pipe them onto the paper. But this one is gorgeous with those lines. The more lines you have on the outside, the more surface area that can get nice and crispy. So I'm going to let that one cook just a little bit more so we get the bottom nice and brown.
All right, we're going to taste test this one.
Yeah, so I'm going to just glaze this. Usually you let this cool, but if you're going to eat it right away, you can just glaze it right away. And the glaze is super simple. Powdered sugar, a little bit of milk, vanilla bean, and salt. So just scrape some vanilla bean directly in there. A little bit of salt will help bring up that vanilla flavor, bring out that sweetness a little bit more. That's ready to eat. If you want to eat the hot one, I'd say always suggest the hot one's the best, but if you want to eat one of these, absolutely.
I know. I want to eat the hot one, but I'm definitely...
Let me cut it in half with the spoon.
I'm terrified of burning my mouth.
But you can hear that super crispy. And it's going to be extremely delicate on the inside. The crisp is going to be outrageous, right?
Amazing. It's so... Outside is perfectly crispy. Inside is like, the crumb is so tender, it's just melting in my mouth. And the glaze is perfectly sweet.
Yep.
And I kind of like that you didn't have to add any sugar to this. It's sweet enough as it is. You really don't need anything else. It's really, really good. So we definitely heartily recommend that you try this recipe. And let us know what you think. And remember, enter to win all these ingredients plus the CMC by leaving the comments below a pastry that you would like to see us tackle next here on WTF. So until next week, from here in the Test Kitchen, I'm Janie Wang.
And I'm Scott Gary.